Welcome to this video on problem prevention methodology. How would you like to solve a problem before it even happens? Please grab a piece of paper and a pen as you will want to take notes as you move through this video at your own pace. The objective of this training is to give you an alternative problem-solving approach, a pre-mortem, to define the issues that have the potential to disrupt your work. Participants will be able to anticipate and avoid problems before they occur through a pre-mortem framework, use a pre-mortem tool to assist their development of their problem-solving skills. What is a pre-mortem? Have you heard of this phrase before? Maybe you have heard of it in a medical field sense. Have you heard of this phrase in the context of problem-solving methodology? Hit pause on the video and take 15 seconds to jot down a few ideas that come to mind when you hear the phrase pre-mortem. When you're done, come back to the video. Thank you for thinking through what a pre-mortem might be. I'll read you the definition now. Let's see if it lines up with your thoughts. A pre-mortem is a method for identifying possible problems with a project before they happen. In a pre-mortem, you pretend the project or procedure is completed. You also assume it has failed or encountered a variety of problems. You list out all the reasons why the project or procedure failed and the problems associated with it. Next, group the reasons using a likelihood or severity matrix. Solve the problems that are very likely and very severe before beginning implementation or execution. Have a contingency plan for problems that are not likely but very severe. We will go into more detail on this process in our next section. The pre-mortem approach requires the employee to solicit information from various sources and people in advance of the execution of their work in order to determine potential problems, symptoms, and suggestions for alternative approaches. But why do a pre-mortem? How does it develop your problem-solving skills? I want you to pause the video for 15 seconds to write down a few ideas on why this approach will be helpful. Thank you for pausing the video to think through why a pre-mortem might help our work and problem-solving skills. A pre-mortem helps us identify potential problems and avoid them. It saves us time and energy during the execution of the project or standard procedure. If a project pre-mortem is done effectively, problems can be identified, assessed, and adequately planned for. This will better enable you to deliver high-quality, on-time project results. There are 4 steps to a pre-mortem. Step 1, select the project or procedure of focus. Step 2, create a list of hypothetical problems and failures. Step 3, create and fill out a likelihood or severity assessment. And step 4, create solutions and contingency plans. The first step of the pre-mortem process is to select the project or procedure you want to conduct a pre-mortem on. Pull out your project plan or a standard operating procedure. If they don't exist, list out the major steps or processes associated with the project or procedure. The second step of the pre-mortem process is to look at the hypothetical problems and failures. Pretend the project is complete and that it has failed in some way, or you faced a multitude of problems with the execution of the standard operating procedure. List out all the things that happened to make the project or procedure fail, or the problems you encountered. It helps to do this by section, or by steps within the project or procedure. In addition to asking yourself point blank, why might this project fail, some other questions that might be useful for identifying major project risks include: who are the major stakeholders involved in this project? What level of input is required from these stakeholders? When is it required, and when might it get in the way? What data is required? Where do I plan to get this data? Is it secondary research, interviews, surveys, focus groups? How difficult do I estimate it will be to get this data? What internal and external factors might prevent me from delivering this project on time? What other projects am I working on right now? How do those projects compare to one of these in terms of priority? Pause the video to brainstorm hypothetical problems, failures of the project you selected in step 1. The third step in the pre-mortem process is to use a matrix to assess the likelihood and severity of the problems you have hypothesized. Place your list of items in each box according to the problem's likelihood and severity. A likely severity matrix helps us prioritize which problems we will solve. The different boxes have different follow-up steps. Very severe and very likely means plan for and solve this problem before it happens. Very severe and not likely, identify triggers and have a clear contingency plan. Not severe and very likely. Train your team to spot and solve this problem. Not severe and not likely. Don't worry about it. How likely is the problem to occur based on this scale? How severe is the problem if it does occur? I want you to prioritize the hypothetical problems by likelihood and severity to more quickly assess which problems will need solutions or contingency plans developed first. You're now going to pause the video to categorize the likelihood and severity of the potential problems you brainstormed in step 2. Solve problems that are very likely and very severe before beginning implementation or execution. Have a contingency plan for problems that are not likely but very severe. Once you've identified and assessed all relevant risks, the next step is to identify a problem response. If a problem is assessed to be high priority, high likelihood, and high severity, it's important to come up with a planned response. There are 5 major responses to choose from. The response is dependent upon the type of problem, its probability of occurring, and its potential impact. Let's now review each response. So the first you see is avoid. This is very severe and very likely. The project plan is changed so that it becomes impossible for the problem to occur. This is an appropriate response for high priority issues that are impossible to avoid. The next is to mitigate. This applies to very severe and very likely, also known as risk reduction. Actions are taken to lessen the probability or the impact of the problem. The threat has been anticipated and provisions for addressing it are in place. Contingency. Very severe and not likely. A trigger is established that can be used to indicate whether the problem will occur and how it will impact the project if it does occur. A plan B is developed, and if the trigger occurs, this plan is put into effect and the project plan is changed at that time. Transfer. This applies to non-severe and very likely. Actions are taken so that an outside stakeholder assumes responsibility for addressing a portion or all of the risk. For example, having a third-party insurance provider. Finally, accept. This is for not severe and not likely. No action is taken because the problem is insignificant and/or extremely improbable. No change to the project plan is required. I want you to now pause the video to assign a response to each of the problems you identified during your pre-mortem brainstorm. After you've done that, reflect on the assignments. Why did one problem get a contingency plan and another get an accept? Were there any risks that you were unsure how to address? We have now covered the 4 steps of conducting a pre-mortem. Step 1, select the project procedure of focus. Step 2, create hypothetical problems and failures. Step 3, assess the likelihood and severity with an assessment. And step 4, create solutions and contingency plans. Each step helps us identify, assess, and adequately plan for potential problems. This will better enable you to deliver high-quality, on-time project results. Today we have learned what a pre-mortem is, why it helps to do a pre-mortem, and the 4 steps to pre-mortems. To receive credit for participating in this session, please email the address below with the listed subject line, course name, and completion code. Make sure to include all of the information. Thank you for participating. Please email the Total Force Development account if you have any additional questions or comments, or contact your local BD17.